Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm just going to introduce myself first, and then I have a slide set that I'm going to share with all of you. So my name is Dr. Munji. I am an assistant professor here at Cal State Fullerton. I started in 2019. So I've been here, this is my third year teaching, and I'm actually a graduate of the CSU system. So I did my undergraduate degree at CSU Fresno, and I also completed my master's degree at CSU Fresno, so another sister CSU school. And then I went on to do my PhD at UC Irvine in civil engineering with an emphasis in structural or earthquake engineering. And now I'm back at the CSU, which was my favorite institution to be at. So I'm happy to be back here now. And I'm hoping I can share some useful information with all of you. We have a nice small group, which we're going to have a nice intimate discussion today. So please feel free to unmute at any time if you want to add something or ask a question or contribute to the discussion. I love having open discussions in classrooms or in workshops. So don't feel like you have to just stay muted, or you can go ahead and use the chat, and I'll try to keep an eye on that as well. Okay. So let me get this PowerPoint going and share my screen here. So hang tight. All right, I hope you guys can all see this. Okay. So today we're going to talk about building and maintaining confidence as a minority in a STEM field. Okay, I've already introduced myself, but my email is on this first slide here as well. So if you want to jot that down, if you have any questions for me later that you kind of remember, please feel free to reach out. I'll also share it in the chat with you if you kind of forget to write it down from this slide, but okay, so I already went over this. I did graduate with my PhD in 2019, and I began working as an assistant professor here at Cal State Fullerton the same year I graduated. So yeah, I've been here for 3 years now. And I wanted to start with this quote by Michelle Obama, which says, "Your success will be determined by your own confidence and fortitude." Okay, so this quote meant a lot to me because it really ties in this idea of confidence when it comes to being successful. It's not necessarily about your skills or abilities, which are also important. It really is about how you view yourself and how confident you are. And I feel like that has so much to do with what you think you can do and how you're going to succeed in your future. So I kind of wanted to start the discussion with this quote, and let's continue here with this. So one of the biggest issues I've faced, or also I guess research studies have shown here, is that minority students in particular have a lack of confidence in specifically STEM fields when you compare this to non-minority students. So we have several research studies that have shown this, but also, I've personally felt this as well. When you are the minority of a group, it is very intimidating. And sometimes it's this feeling that comes over you that you aren't as capable as your counterparts. So it is a very intimidating environment. And one of the biggest reasons for this feeling is imposter syndrome, accompanied with also fear of failure. So the problem is actually, how many of you know what imposter syndrome is, or are familiar with imposter syndrome? Anybody? Some of you? Okay, so some of us are familiar with it. So for those of you that are familiar with it, anybody care to share what this means to them? Let's see how quiet of a group we have.
I'll give my 2 cents of what I think imposter syndrome is. It's just feeling like you're not worthy, or you don't belong, or you're just not capable of fulfilling the role that you're supposed to fulfill. That's just my way of interpreting that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's exactly what it is. It's a feeling. It's not necessarily anything based on fact. It's this feeling that you don't belong. And it's this feeling that, oh, I'm here, but I shouldn't be. or someone gave me this opportunity, but they don't know that I really don't belong here and that I'm really not capable of doing what they think I can do. Okay. The other issue is we have this fear of failure sometimes, that I don't even want to try something because I don't think I'm going to succeed at it. And the problem with that is if you have this fear and it's looming over you, it's going to prevent you from ever taking advantage of these significant opportunities that come your way, because you're daunted by this potential of not succeeding, when in reality, everybody fails at things all the time. And this is one of the best opportunities for growth, which we're going to get to in the next few slides. Okay. So let's first start by talking a little bit more about imposter syndrome. Okay, I see something in the chat here. Oh, thank you. Irma also added, feeling that you didn't deserve something that you worked for. Exactly. You may have worked so hard for something, harder than someone else who is in the same program or the same job as you, but you don't feel like you deserve it, right? And I think the key here is remembering that that's a feeling, right? And feelings are not always based on factual information. So the idea is, how can we overcome this feeling of imposter syndrome? And that's what I kind of want to talk about first. So in the next slide, in the next few slides, we're going to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome. And I think I mentioned this, but I'm in civil engineering. I am a minority in my field as a female, but I'm not an expert at all in confidence or imposter syndrome or these things. So I do have a lot of references in here that were helpful for me. And that's why I'm putting them in here, because I hope they're helpful for you. And I just want to kind of open that discussion and make everyone comfortable in feeling that you're not alone in having these feelings, and they're totally okay. But I also have a really fun video clip that helped me when I was trying to deal with this. So I do have a video clip in here for you as well. But let's start with imposter syndrome. So I really like this slide because it kind of sums up the way kind of imposter syndrome works versus the reality of the situation most of the time. So the first part of this on the left, we have this tiny bubble of this orange bubble where it says what I know. Then we have the larger yellow bubble, which is what I think others know. So others know all of this information, but I only know this really tiny circle of information. When in reality, we all know very similar amounts of information. Okay. And I feel like this is something that it doesn't always come to you, this reality. It doesn't always come to you. It's something you kind of have to keep telling yourself. And you really have to keep talking to people who can honestly share their experiences, because as you move up and you kind of experience different things, you start to realize this more, that, you know what I thought other people know and the amount that I thought that, they know versus what I know is really not that different. Everybody is kind of in the same boat of trying to figure things out most of the time. Okay, so I know this is easy to look at, but one of the things you can do is you can constantly remind yourself of that. So you have to actually positively reinforce this idea, right? And it's all about that mentality of not bringing yourself down. So it's this positive reinforcement that you have to share with yourself all the time. So I do like to look at this often, especially when I feel down, and it kind of helps me with that. So I have a clip here from Dr. Valerie Young. I don't know if any of you have heard of her, but I do love anything from TED Talks. So Dr. Valerie Young is an expert on imposter syndrome. And I found this video a while back, and it really helped me kind of figure out, first of all, what imposter syndrome really is. And she is an expert. She's an author of an award-winning book called Thoughts on Successful Women: Why Capable People Suffer from the Imposter Syndrome and How to Thrive in Spite of It. So this is a great read if you are interested in reading it, but also if that's not your thing, there's a nice short video clip here that I want to watch with all of you. And then I kind of want to have a little discussion on your thoughts about this video afterwards, and go from there. So I'm going to push play. Hopefully this works.
Have you ever had that I'm in over my head and they're going to find out feeling? Maybe it was when you got a promotion, or you started a business, or you landed in a new role. Like the highly qualified administrator who couldn't believe they gave her the job, Once she got there, she found out the hiring committee had come directly from a wine function. And she said, aha, they were drunk. Or maybe you've said, if I can do it, how hard can it be? I actually heard a guy say, if I can get a PhD in astrophysics from Caltech, anybody can. This tendency to discount or diminish obvious evidence of our abilities is called the imposter syndrome. The first time I heard the term, I was a 21-year-old doctoral student at the same university where my mom was working as a night janitor. I instantly identified, and so did the other students. As a matter of fact, we decided to start a little imposter support group. We started meeting and talking about being intellectual frauds and how we're fooling all of our professors. And everything went great for about 3 weeks. And that's about the time I started to have this nagging sense that even though everyone else was saying they were an imposter, it's like I knew I was the only real imposter. Decades later, and psychologists are still telling us that the way to overcome imposter syndrome is to just keep talking about it. The more we can talk about our supposed ineptness, the better we'll feel. I don't know, has anybody ever talked about how fat you feel? It's like, do you feel any thinner? Talking about imposter feelings is a start, but you can't share your way out of imposter syndrome. So what does work? Well, it begins by recognizing that people who really don't feel like imposter are no more intelligent or capable than you or I. That the only difference between them and us is they think different thoughts. That's it. Which is really good news because it means all we have to do is learn to think like a non-imposter. For example, the big difference between people who feel like imposters and people who don't is no one likes to fail. No one likes to make a mistake. No one likes to not know the answer or to have an off day or to struggle to master something. But when these things happen to imposters, we experience shame. Like the woman who was the head of a large medical center who said to me, I feel like an imposter because, oh, everyone else on the executive team is brilliantly articulate and I'm not. Now, there was a time when I would have said to her, oh, I'm sure you're brilliantly articulate. But now I know that wouldn't have served her. So instead I said, well, maybe you're not. Maybe you're not. And that's okay. She was thinking like an imposter. Non-imposters know they can't be brilliant at everything, and they're fine with that. The reason we have to pay attention to the conversation going on in our head is so we can reframe it the way a non-imposter would. My favorite reframe of all time came from Daniel Boone, the wilderness explorer, who said, I was never lost, but I was bewildered once for 3 days. That is a very good reframe. Somebody in serious need of a reframe was a friend of mine who was asked to put together a major presentation at the last minute. She nailed it. But all she could think of was, oh man, that was just a bunch of BS I threw together at the last minute. What's the reframe? How about, wow, how good am I that I can pull together information at the 11th hour that other people genuinely find useful? That last part is really important because it speaks to a contradiction in imposter logic. Because when you think about it, what we're really saying is other people are so stupid, they don't realize we're incompetent. So imagine if you had come up to my friend and said, that was great. And she looked at you and said, seriously? Wow. I mean, do you get out of the house much or what? Right? How arrogant and how absurd would that sound? What should she say in that situation? Yeah, thank you. Exactly. The thing about imposter syndrome is that it affects up to 70% of people. Not just high achievers, but it's a confidence issue for a lot of people. So for years, I would give people 10 ways to combat imposter syndrome. And then there was always that one person who would say, but is there anything else we can do? And I would say, well, of the 10 things I just gave you, what have you tried? Right? Well, nothing, but is there anything else we can do? It took me a while, but I finally figured out what was happening. What they wanted was to walk in the room feeling like an imposter and walk out of the room not feeling like an imposter. And that's not how it works. In fact, feelings are the last to change. Do you want to stop feeling like an imposter? Then you have to stop thinking like an imposter. How would you like to feel confident 24/7? Yeah, good luck with that. Because that's not how confidence works. Your body doesn't know the difference between fear and excitement. So as you're walking up to the podium or into the meeting or any place where your confidence is shaky, you have to say to yourself, I'm excited. I'm excited. You don't believe it, and that's okay. Because now you know that you don't have to feel confident to act confident. And over time, you really will begin to believe the new thoughts. And when you do, you can stop trying to overcome imposter syndrome and instead just use reframing to talk yourself down faster. That way, instead of having an imposter life, you can have an imposter moment. Thank you.
Okay, so any thoughts that we want to share from this video? We have a really quiet group today. That's okay.
I have a couple of comments.
Sure.
So first, she was very funny. I loved it. She reminds me a bit of Hillary Clinton. But I guess when I was listening to it, and the reason why I'm at this meeting is because I've had a couple of faculty members. I'm a graduate student in STEM, and I have a couple of faculty members and peers that have flat out told me to my face that the only reason why I'm getting scholarships or even in graduate school is because I'm a woman of color. And I guess it's hard for me to like shake that thought of like imposter syndrome when I'm hearing it from other people when it's outside of my own head. And so I was just thinking like, I don't know how to reframe that conversation. I can try to reframe it with myself, yeah, but how to steer that conversation away with other people where they're not bluntly telling me, you know, that I don't deserve what I got.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most unfortunate kind of aspects, because you're trying to work on yourself and the way that you feel regardless of kind of those outside factors or perspectives. And then you get that kind of feedback and it kind of pushes you back even farther. It takes you 10,000 steps back from where you were. I think like my own personal advice for those situations, which I have kind of heard before, but I will say not very often, is sometimes it's important to remove yourself from those situations and think about the person telling you what they're telling you. Because most of the time, that person who is giving you that feedback, that's stemming from their own insecurities. If you feel the need to put anybody down in that way, it's usually because you're trying to deal with something yourself and it's not right. They're projecting their own emotion and their own issues on someone else. And if you can reframe it and think, you know, this isn't about me, actually, this is completely about them and the way that they're viewing something, that would be the reframe that I would do. I would push it back on and say, not even necessarily that you have to answer that. It would just be something that you would think in your head, this has nothing to do with you and everything to do with that person.
Definitely agree. Thank you. It's just sometimes you need to hear it from someone successful enough so I can be like, hey, I'm not alone.
I'm happy that's helpful. I mean, I've had to, that's the thing. No matter at what point you are, it's all relative. And I've had to actually I've had to do the same thing, even talking to like family and friends about that. And I think it's also a matter of like figuring out who to go to for different kinds of things that you need in your life and your academic life and your personal life. But definitely finding mentors that genuinely care about your success. And I talk about mentors later as well. I think that's one of the most important things you can do, because those people are people in your life who should be at least a positive influence, who build you up. And when you feel down, they can kind of identify these things that you have to build your confidence instead of ever breaking it like that. And that goes for kind of anything in life. Irma, you have your hand up. I didn't know if you were responding previously or you had a question or comment.
Sorry, that was an accident, my bad.
No, you're good. It's okay. Okay, I want to read in the chat. We have Mona here saying, I agree that having confidence doesn't mean being confident 100% of the time. It's okay to be unsure from time to time or not know. And I absolutely agree with that. I think even the most confident person, definitely, if they say that they're confident 100% of the time, it's probably not even true, or they're probably not even sure. So I definitely, I really like this idea of you're not trying to eliminate imposter syndrome from your life completely. You're trying to lessen the times where you feel that. And if it comes up sometimes, that's okay. It's just like a natural feeling of anything else. Like maybe most of the time you have positive feelings and sometimes you get a little negative, and that's just life, right? So it's not that when you feel imposter syndrome, you have to completely think that you've done something wrong or you're taking steps back. It's okay to feel that way as long as you can reframe and get out of it. And it, like, you know, like Dr. Valerie Young said, have that moment instead of a lifetime of feeling like an imposter. Any other comments, feedback? Okay, so let's move on. Let's talk about some takeaways. Actually, this was the takeaways from the video clip. This was this slide. So we already went through this. Let's move on and talk about addressing imposter syndrome. So some of the takeaways that I had when I was watching the video, and a lot of you've already said these, but the first thing that I would do, especially when I would feel down or I would feel that I wasn't good enough, is I would completely stop comparing yourself to other people. Okay. Whether you're comparing yourself to people at your level, above you, who are not at the point in life where you're at, the number one thing you have to do is do not compare. And I think that this is really hard to do, especially in this day and age when you have access to so many people, and you know, through social media, you're seeing all these people's lives. And even social media, there is a huge like following for professionals, and like on Twitter and all these different platforms. And you see what all these people are accomplishing, and it kind of brings you down sometimes, right? So the first thing you can do is figure out a way to stop comparing yourself to other people. And if that means like stopping those outlets where you get information about other people, or you're in those positions where you're exposed to them, that's the first thing you can do. Okay. The next thing is you cannot harp on your past mistakes. You kind of have to let go of these things. Everybody makes mistakes. That's a part of learning. It's a part of growth. It's a part of life. So you have to kind of embrace these opportunities actually that you have to make mistakes. And we're going to talk about failure in a little bit as well. And that kind of goes hand in hand. This is one of the most important things, and it's separating the way you feel versus facts and reality. Okay. In the end of the day, imposter syndrome is based on feelings that you don't feel competent enough. You don't feel good enough. It is not that you are not good enough or that you don't have the skills to be where you are, because if you didn't have them, quite frankly, you wouldn't get the job. You wouldn't get admitted into the program. Okay. And that's the truth. The next thing is visualize what success looks like for you specifically. Okay. If you can really take a second to think about what you want for your life and not what's expected of it in terms of what you're professionally seeking, what does it look like for you? It could be a small accomplishment, and that could be your definition of success. And maybe you need to start with those baby steps before you look so far into the future, right? A CV or a resume is just a bunch of stuff, a bunch of small experiences that add up to something meaningful. So how is it that you want to build that CV or build that resume and build your professional experiences, right? The next thing you can do is reward yourself. When you do accomplish something and you're successful at it, don't let other people bring you down and tell you that you got this because of this or that. Reward yourself and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. So that comes in the reframing. You need to think positively. That comes to the next one. You have to constantly tell yourself, I need to think positively about this. I cannot let negative thoughts overtake me. And if you reiterate that enough times to yourself, you will start believing it. That's kind of what Dr. Young was saying too. You might not believe it the first time you say it or the second time you say it, but if you say it enough, that will become what you manifest and it will become who you are. And then my last kind of takeaway here is fake it till you make it. So this goes hand in hand with kind of telling yourself those things that you may not even believe. Okay. This might have like a little bit more of a negative connotation to it. So I mean this in a good way, not faking your skills or your abilities, but if you don't feel confident, fake it until you manifest that confidence. Okay. Even if you feel it inside that you don't belong somewhere, don't let other people see that. And I guarantee you those comments that you're getting from people will slowly diminish if they see that confidence on the outside. They will not approach you anymore with those kinds of comments because they'll probably be too intimidated to say those kinds of things to you. Okay. So you have to kind of put this wall up and make sure you again are harboring these very positive feelings and that you believe you even have the ability to be confident. Okay. Anything? Oh, I have this slide here for. So this is just a fun meme I added, but this is basically sometimes how I feel, right? Like, you know, this is imposter syndrome. You're doing something and it looks all fancy on the outside and really in your head, you're thinking, this is what I look like and I have no idea what I'm doing, but nobody on the outside knows. That's the idea. Okay. Okay. Any other comments or questions or things anybody wants to add about imposter syndrome before we kind of jump into the second big reason we feel like this as minorities in STEM, which is fear of failure? Anything I missed?
One thing that I do want to add and that has helped me recently, like get over imposter syndrome and like other things going on as well, is the thought of my thoughts are not real until I believe them. So I just keep telling myself if I'm thinking something negative about myself or something going on, I like keep telling myself that until like you get over it, because it's only in the moment and it's up to you how long that feeling lasts.
Yeah, absolutely. That is wonderful, wonderful advice. And it all goes back to those are feelings in your head, right? They're feelings in your head, not based on fact. Absolutely. Anything else?
I actually have an experience I'd like to share. It was right before my first committee meeting. I'm a graduate student, and I was having major imposter syndrome, just feeling incompetent, terrified to give my presentation. And a friend of mine said, if someone came up to you and constantly said, you're stupid, you don't know what you're doing, would you keep those people in your life, or would you tell them to like go F off? And I was like, no, of course I would not keep those people in my life. And he said, well, that's you in your head when you're having these thoughts, and you need to stop that. And it just blew my mind. And sure enough, I took that advice and I remember that. And come my first committee meeting, I was just confident, cool, collective. It was honestly one of the best advices that I've been given. So if that can help anyone, that's why I wanted to share this.
Yeah, I think that's great. And it's like, sometimes you'll just get that one small tidbit or one small piece of information and you'll have that aha moment of, oh my gosh, that's what I needed. And it's almost like, yeah, you are that person that you wouldn't want around you sometimes, right? You don't want to be that person for yourself. You should be your biggest motivator.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. This is great. Okay, so let's move on and let's talk about fear of failure and how we can kind of attack or address this feeling. Okay, so the first thing is we need to figure out how to overcome this fear. Okay, and this kind of also comes back to that discussion by Dr. Young, which is like, you do have the ability to reframe anything you want. Okay. There are people that can have the same experiences in life and have completely different lives just based on the way they view those experiences. So we have this ability as human beings to think about things differently and reframe the way we view anything. So how can we reframe failure? And the first thing is, can we see failure as something good? Failure can be good. Can we reframe failure? It's not a negative word. Okay, so a study, I'm going to read this here. A study conducted by Northwestern University Kellogg School of Management analyzed data from scientists who applied for grants early in their career. Scientists who did not receive grant funding in their early careers were 6.1% more likely to publish a high impact paper than scientists who did receive funding right away. So the idea here, this is actually a much longer study. I just got one tidbit from it. But the idea behind this is basically there is some correlation with experiencing failure and being motivated to grow from it, to the point where these people were more likely to publish in a high impact journal or a high impact paper than the ones who just got what they wanted right away. So there is, and there are tons of studies like this, by the way, if you just go and kind of look for them. There is tons of information out there on how actually, we don't even have to call it failure, how going through this process of, this iterative process and prototyping and having experiences that don't work out versus having some that do is such a beneficial thing for us. It's such a beneficial process for us as human beings. And it actually adds to our motivation and our desire to do better. So you need to take these instances where you see yourself as a failure and say, no, this is an opportunity for me to do even better. I'm happy I didn't get that. That might be a stretch. We're not always happy when we don't get what we want, but you need to really reframe it like that. And another thing that's really important along this line of thought is go back and think of things you didn't get in your life from maybe a few years back. And you might see, like, you know what? I'm really happy I didn't get that opportunity because it motivated me to do this. I didn't get stuck in something else. I really wanted it at that point. I'm really happy I didn't get it then. I wasn't ready for it. It wasn't the right time. I wouldn't have succeeded in it, whatever the reason is. But you need to go back and really think about those experiences in your life. And then when the next time comes and you maybe don't get what you want right away, you can look back and say, I'm going to trust this process and use this as an opportunity to grow. Okay. The next thing is failure can give us a new perspective on something that we didn't see before. Okay. So the idea here is that every success comes with multiple rejections that we may or may not see, right? We only see what we get rejected from. You don't necessarily ask people what their rejections have been. And if you do, people are usually not very forthcoming with sharing their rejections with people. It's a very difficult thing to talk about. So a professor of psychology and public affairs at Princeton University decided to publish a CV of failures throughout his career. And this was to encourage students who felt discouraged by failure. Okay. He includes schools he didn't get accepted to, grants that never got funding. And this is the best part. He lists his most epic failure as this darn CV of failures that has received way more attention than my entire body of academic work. So this actually kind of went like viral and people were sharing this everywhere because it's kind of unheard of that, people who are quote unquote successful will share any of the times when they didn't get what they wanted right away or they didn't get what they were trying to immediately. Right? So the idea here is you have to also kind of view failure as something that happens to everybody, whether you're successful or not, as objective as that is, and whatever that may mean to you, right? This is a normal part of life. Okay. I see a chat thing here. Yeah, exactly. What didn't work out for you really worked out for you. That's great. Exactly. So you have to, again, really start believing these things that you're hearing, right? These are applicable to you. We can all do this. We just have to kind of believe that we can reframe failure and that we can reframe our thoughts in general. Okay. The next one is we have to believe failure truly does help us learn and grow. Okay. And there's a quote here, a smooth sea never made a skilled sailor. Right? You really do have to get in there. And you can think of this in the most simple example. So I'm guessing everyone in here is from STEM. I teach a very fundamental engineering class called statics for civil and mechanical engineers. I'm teaching it this semester. And these are new undergrad students in engineering. This is their first exposure to an engineering class, like they've taken physics and math, right? And a lot of times they'll take their first exam and they're shook because they did so poorly. They're, you know, I got an A in physics, I got an A in math. How did this happen? What's going on? And I always have this conversation. I almost want to just record myself and replay it in all my classes, but I have this conversation with them every single time. And it's this question: did you attempt the problems without looking at the solution? No. Why would I do that? Well, did you try the problems and get them wrong a couple of times? No, I don't want to get anything wrong. I always look at the solution. So my answer to them is, if you haven't tried it without looking at the solution, how are you going to do it on an exam when you don't have the solution in front of you? Right? The answer is you won't be able to. And I also give them this lecture on something called YouTube confidence. Okay, so I didn't invent this term. This is an actual term. There was another study that was done where there's a group of people and they're shown a YouTube video. And the YouTube video shows you how to fix a car. And they survey these groups, these people before and after watching the video, and how confident they are to fix a car before they watch the video versus after they watch the video. And after they watch the video, they're all super confident. Like, we can totally fix this car. We can do it right now. Give us the car. We're ready, right? They put them in front of the car and they cannot do anything. Okay, so this is YouTube confidence. If you don't actually go in and try something, you will never know how to do it. If you don't let yourself get those problems wrong a couple times in that most fundamental sense of math or science, right? You will never know how to do it the right way, right? It's not that the person next to you who got the A is smarter than you. It's not like that at all. And I promise you that as an instructor, I promise you that is not the case, because I have seen so many students overcome this feeling of when they fail a first exam and literally come out of that class with an A afterwards, just because they've reframed their perspective. Just because they realized, oh, I do need to try something and fail at it a couple times when it's a low stakes environment, especially. You studying on your own is a low stakes environment. You can do a problem 100 times on your own and get it wrong 100 times, and there's no consequence to that, right? But when it comes to a higher stakes environment like an exam, if you've put in that work, you definitely have the ability to succeed when the time comes. So you have to put yourself in this situation to become the skilled sailor by sailing in the rough waters. That's basically what we're trying to say here. Okay. Okay, love this quote. So, I've not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. And this is Thomas Edison. Right? It's a really good example of reframing the way you think about something. Right? And I know that that's particularly hard to do as a minority. Right? So that's the whole thing here, is that in order to get to this point, we have to already be on board with reframing our thoughts, building our confidence, and really changing our perspective of how we see ourselves as deserving what we're being given to build our confidence, and reframing those ideas of failures that we have. Okay, so we have a comment here that resonates with me: trying something and allowing space for failure in low stakes environments. Yes, absolutely. I'm so glad that that was helpful. It's definitely helpful for me as well. And I hope it's helpful for my undergrad students too, which is why I share that every semester. I love this meme. If I don't move, I can't fail. And this is like basically what we've been talking about. Of course, if you never put yourself out there and you never try, don't worry. You're never going to fail. So there are people out there that have never failed. They exist. This is what they look like. Okay. Anybody else who, again, is quote unquote successful does not fit into this picture. I guarantee you at some point in their life, whether they want to share it with you or not, whether they believe it's a failure or not, or whether they frame it as a failure or not, they have experienced failure. Okay. Now, for example, on like college entrance essays, a lot of colleges, a lot of very good colleges are asking students to talk about failure. And the reason for that is there's this shift in the connotation of the word failure from being something really negative to being something positive. And they're trying to instill this in new generations. So I think we may have kind of missed that. I'm hoping this works for future generations because it's so important. But they are asking these questions of, I believe it's even Stanford and some of the very high level schools are asking students define or talk about an instance where you've experienced failure. That's all they ask, but what they really want you to do is they want you to talk about an instance where you've experienced failure, but you've learned from that. They don't really want you to talk about a time where you've actually just failed at something. They want to see that you have the ability, even at this young age, to reframe what failure means to you. So even, 17, 18-year-olds are being pushed into this new definition of what it means to experience a failure. So I'm really excited to see this word shift from something that sounds so scary and negative to something that honestly could be exciting, an opportunity to grow. You know what? I applied for this funding. I didn't get it. I'm going to apply for something else and I'm going to do it better. And when I get that, or I don't get it, it's going to motivate me to do something else. And I'm going to believe that was what was best for me. Okay. So now we've kind of talked about these like tips and tricks and motivational, little things that we can do to overcome imposter syndrome and to reframe the way we view failure. And now I want to talk about my own personal experience as a woman in STEM. Okay. So I kind of have mentioned this already, that a lot of the things when I had first started out as, a woman in engineering, were so based on the way I felt, I couldn't distinguish them from what the facts were. And that was one of the most difficult things for me. So I started basically in my undergrad. I was 17 years old. It was in Fresno, and I was one of 3 other girls in the program, and not in the program, in my cohort. And I'm really happy to see that in my classes now, the ratio has shifted a little bit more. So I'm happy for that. But I definitely had this, it was a feeling, but the problem is you feel that feeling is a fact. So the first thing you need to do is stop psyching yourself out. But what personally worked for me, the big things that worked for me to change these kind of ideas I had about myself were getting involved on campus. That was one of the number one things that helped, was getting involved on campus and in my department. So I started getting involved in clubs. And just by getting involved in clubs, I felt like I was a part of something. I felt like I was contributing to something. Then I started getting involved in tutoring and in study groups. This was all undergrad. So these first 3 bullet points I started doing in undergrad. And it significantly changed my perspective, because I actually felt at that point like, okay, these people that I'm going to school with, they're not so bad. They are not all judging me like I thought. They don't all think that I don't deserve to be here, even though there are probably some of them that do. It's not the case with all of them. And I can actually build these relationships. And they actually value my opinion when I talk in one of the clubs, or people are coming to me for tutoring, because I worked really hard in this one class, or in a study group, something I say is valuable. And it just takes those little instances sometimes to change your perspective. When I got into my master's program, I stayed at the same university and I got involved in research. And that totally changed my world. Okay. It was extremely intimidating. It was extremely scary, but I had a really good mentor who I was really comfortable with. And I think that made the world of difference. So for me, finding a faculty mentor and working on a project with him where I was extremely pushed to do things I had never done before in terms of critical thinking, in terms of solving a problem that didn't have an answer. And the fact that this mentor was allowing me to really go out there and give my own take on things, really, like, it put the pressure on me in a good way. because I thought, oh my gosh, this is a funded project and they actually think that I have something valuable to contribute to it. This is wild. And so it was exactly what I needed. And I think that that's really important. You don't have to kind of tack on to the first mentor that you see. You're allowed to, you know, have several and find what works for you in different instances. Sometimes you'll be part of a research project and you'll realize, you know what, that wasn't for me. The topic didn't work for me. I wasn't motivated in this way. And it may not be research for you. It may be something else. It may be a professional internship. It could be anything. But the idea is, again, they're all examples of situations where you're going to have to put yourself out there a little bit and get out of your comfort zone. We can't be the little dog lying on the couch, not moving. Right? So whatever that is for you, and you may not even know what it is, you may need to experiment a little bit. I also experimented. I tried working in industry for a year. I found that wasn't my thing. It didn't motivate me. Right. And that's kind of what motivated me to pursue a PhD. So I didn't look at it as a failure. I looked at it as something that wasn't right for me. And I moved on. And by the time I got to grad school like that, I was able to do that. I was able to reframe the things that were happening in my life and say, okay, not for me, for me, I'm moving forward here. I'm going to let this one go. I'm going to go with this, until you really start narrowing down and finding that niche that works for you, or that one thing that kind of works for you, those couple of things that work. Okay. I have a whole bullet point here on mentorship. So mentorship does not just have to be a faculty member. It can be a faculty member. It can be a peer. It can be someone in your personal life. I think that the one thing is, I don't like to put any like boxes or labels, but I think the one thing that's important though, is that this person is a positive influence in your life. We can reframe the word failure to not have a negative connotation, but the word negative still needs to stay out of our life. We cannot be negative, and we can't have any of these negative thoughts, right? So if you feel like you're not getting that positivity that you need, you're not getting that encouragement, it's okay to look elsewhere, and you might get different things from different mentors. So you need to start building this network for yourself of people that you trust, people that you can talk to, and people that genuinely want to see you succeed. That's kind of what a mentor or a coach should have in mind for you. If they don't want you to succeed, there's a problem, right? They should genuinely have an interest in your success. They should be happy when you accomplish something. Okay. Okay. That is all I have in terms of like the formal presentation. So I do want to stop here and kind of open it up to any questions or any kind of discussion